despite the platform, I work in hotel management. There are children who come to school only because of the
සන්දයක්කේ අනේ කූටයි නෝ මේ ළමයි තෝලක් එක ෆොටෝ එකක් ගන්න.
And journalists are as complicit as their ants. Their suffering doesn't let you sleep. That the headlines, the issues, is that Lasanthas was the true Aragal. This was the Aragal and it began long, long ago. Before
who the perpetrators were. And even the families who have ordered the kids together with the policies. So which gives an indication and also a reason why there is no political will to see justice is moved ahead to the Sarkar.
ඉවරයිනේ දැන්.
කවුද? It's very difficult. Welcome all.
In the sweet by and by.
ඔහුගේ ජීවිත අහිමි වෙලා වසර 15ක් වෙනවා. ඒ වෙනුවෙන් වයඹ පළාතේ මාධ්‍ය ඉගෙන ගන්න දරුවෝ 15 දෙනෙකුට අද සංකේතවත් කරන්න පොත් ප්‍රදානයක් සිදු කරනවා. ඒ වගේම ඔහු මිය ගිහින් අදට දවස් 5500ක් වෙනවා. අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනා මේ අවුරුද්දේවත් මේක නව රජයකින් වසන්ත වික්‍රමතුංගගේ මෙතුමාට සාධාරණ යුක්තිය වේවා කියලා ස්තුතියි.
මේ රටේ මාධ්‍ය නිර්භීතව ඉදිරිපත් කර රටේ දූෂණ පිළිබඳව නිර්භීතව ජනතාව දැනුවත් කර ඒ ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨ මාධ්‍යවේදියා නීතිඥවරයා ජාත්‍යන්තර තලයේ පිළිගත් නීතිඥ ලසන්ත මහතා අධ්‍යාරක්ෂක කලාපයේ ඉතාම අමානුෂික මරා දැමීම වෙනුවෙන් අපි තාමත් දුක් වෙනවා අපි කනගාටු වෙනවා සාටකයා ඝාතකයා කියලා එදා බලය ලබාගත් අය අද සාටකය පෙරෝගෙන ඉන්න ගැන කනගාටු වෙනවා නමුත් අපි යුක්තිය ඉටු කරන බවට තාමත් පොරොන්දු වෙනවා
One of which is knowing that there were motorcycles following you. Why did you go to work, Lasantha? Why didn't you turn back? Why didn't you go somewhere else? And that's the essence of the man, isn't it? That quality of what it was to be Lasantha. And he himself answers that question. When he asks himself, is it worth the risk? And then he says, it is, because there is that call of conscience. And in her book, Rain talks about Lasantha and says, he's a man who knew no fear, and he had tons of courage. And this fear and courage, they are so interrelated, because people mistake courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but courage is the resistance to fear. It is the mastery of fear. Fear is a reaction, courage is a decision. And that's a decision that Lasantha made. And why? Because at heart, he was an investigating journalist. That's the essence of journalism. I was reading a very interesting quote about journalism, and it says journalists can never be silent. That is the greatest virtue and its greatest failure. It must speak and speak immediately, while the echoes of wonder, the claims of triumph, and the signs of horror are still in the air. There's no time. I cannot be put off because there are motorcycles following me. This is my job. And then there is this other quote that says, no other profession calls upon its practitioners to lay down their lives. So in Lasantha, the essence of journalism. And now we come to the question, why do few people meet here? Somebody might ask, what's the big deal? That's why we come to remembrance and memory. Because after all, without memory, what are we? Again, I quote from Louis Buñuel when he says, our memory is our coherence, our reason, our feelings, even our action. Without it, we are nothing. And that's why we thank you, Mary, for bringing us together every year unfailingly. It's not the numbers of people, it's just who comes and keep that memory going. That's why today, and when I think of Lasantha and journalists and dying and doing their job, I think of Waheed Al-Dahdouh, the journalist of Al Jazeera, the head of Al Jazeera. He lost his wife, he lost his son, he lost his daughter, he lost his grandson in October. He buried them the next day. He was there as a journalist recording all that was happening so that we will not forget, that we will remember, and we make meaning of our lives. And yesterday, Waheed's other son, journalist, was killed, and he buried him. And he's back on the streets of Gaza in the rubble, recording from memory, so that we will not forget. And we all remember Lasantha for different reasons. Our memory is for those who seek justice, those who are angered. And yet, there are those like his children who remember him as a father. And they were very young when he passed away. I remember the picture of them standing beside the coffin with shock. And this man of 100 kisses is gone. And today, there's a message from the children which I'd like to read to you. A message from Avinash, Ahimsa and Adesh. 15 years ago today, our father Lasantha Wickrematunge was assassinated in cold blood in a defining moment of loss that shook the spirit of Sri Lanka and broke the hearts of all those who loved and valued peace and democracy. Our father was a peacemaker and a valiant crusader for change. Today his name has become synonymous with the fight for human rights and press freedom and the pursuit of social justice and equality. To us, we knew him only as a kind and dedicated father, a loving support system who was devoted to our family, selfless to a fault, and lived his life for others. We grieve for him every time our family gathers.
Daily violence unfold across our smartphone screens. Every day, there are bleak updates of death, injuries, hunger and displacement from Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Yemen, and closer to home in Balochistan, Myanmar, and Afghanistan, among other countries. For Sri Lankans, a lot of the footage that we are seeing is deeply familiar. After all, we are a country that has lived through and experienced war. My uncle's death is not often recognized as a casualty of war. But as his daughter, my cousin Ahimsa, has pointed out, shortly before he died, my uncle was reporting on the apparatus of war, revealing some unpleasant truths. Lasantha also died as our army made advances across the north and east as the war approached its final phases. As Sri Lankans, we are often told that the patriotic thing to do is to forget, that the innocent lives lost during that final phase of the war should be seen as collateral damage, a small price to pay for victory. At this time, young activists have shown startling moral clarity and a willingness not just to march, but to boycott, call their representatives, and to learn the histories behind violent conflicts around the world. I think that this is fitting for us to talk about and to remember as we are coming together today to remember Lasantha Wickrematunge, a man who thought a lot about power and people in power, who tried to expose the machinations of corrupt politicians and businessmen alike, and who ultimately paid a heavy price for doing so. Even though he is no longer with us, his legacy lives on in all the journalists that passed through the newsrooms where he worked, many of whom continue to work in media and to pass on their knowledge to the younger generation. This is a time of cruelty, not just for the world, but here in Sri Lanka, with skyrocketing prices and higher taxes, that we are told that, once again, we are being told that the patriotic thing to do is to forget. And especially in Colombo, there are many who are all too willing to oblige, especially those who find it difficult to imagine an alternative future for Sri Lanka that does not depend on political patronage. You would think that after the privations experienced last year, people would have realized the heavy cost of accepting the status quo. But we forget that there are many who benefit from the status quo across many different sectors. However, rather than stand on the sidelines and throw up our hands, I am proposing that we choose to remember rather than to forget. And not just to remember Lasantha, his humor, his kindness, his relentless pursuit of a story, but all the fearless journalists and media workers like him who lost their lives. Especially the Tamil journalists from the north and east, whose stories and names are so often forgotten. And I hope too that when it comes time to cast our vote, that we vote consciously, choosing not to vote for racist, corrupt, or power-hungry politicians. I know that if my uncle were here, he would be in the thick of the action, writing scathing editorials and exhorting people to make the right choice. So let's make the right choice, whatever that might mean for each of us. And let's continue to remember and to resist.
That he introduced to Sri Lanka, fostered, maintained, and 3 nuggets from each of the speeches before me. 15 years is a long time, memories are fading. But some things don't fade, as Raisa said. That's possibly what we learned from watching him, what he did, how he did. It was called yellow journalism long ago. For those of us who come from this underlead editorial, we were condemned, ridiculed. That brand of journalism was opposed. And there was litigation, there was violence to be dealt with, there was lots more. But with all of that, again, borrowing a line from all the speakers before me, we saw last year and the year before that a shift among the people in this country. We saw people demanding accountability. We saw people getting on streets and saying enough is enough. That we have seen enough of corruption, we have seen enough of nepotism, we have seen enough of politicians who are irresponsible, who only serve their self-interest, but not the common purpose, and that is to serve the nation's interest. 15 years, again, is a long time. So 13 years later, these young people, it was just 13 years, right? And people did draw from the stories, those ridiculed stories, those labeled as yellow journalism, those condemned by some people, some section of the people, as their slogans. The stories that told the horrific story of Sri Lanka, that was technically, that there was political collapse. There was absolute systemic collapse in this country. But for 15 years, before that, before Aragalya took place, he has been telling these stories before people. He has been telling people, please be conscious of what's happening before your eyes. Pay attention. Be a concerned citizen. We all hopefully can become that concerned citizen today. And whether you vote, despite the political choices you would want to make it something that makes Sri Lanka win. And that's really important to remember. We also speak a lot about dangerous speech today. It's a fad today to talk about dangerous speech, about hate speech, talk about an editorial. In the South, Rice spoke about the northern newsrooms and the fact that we hardly ever remember what went on there and the kind of suffering people went through, which is true. But if you think about the South, I think I'm right to say that no southern newsroom actually went through what the Sunday Leader went through. And that would also be a painful fact that we should all remember. Narratives were created against the newsroom, its editor, and why we were doing what we were doing. And the fact that all these stories were planted, there were so many theories about how we told our stories and what we do. I just want to share three quotes two from him. In October 2008, he gave me an interview. It was way too, close to his death. When I was doing the Status of Media in Sri Lanka report for the Asian Media Forum, and in which he said, this is about narratives. Now we all know Lasantha is a man who proposed an alternate narrative and mainstreamed it. Maybe it was extremely unpopular, hence the gathering today. So going back to what he said, I quote, there is a dangerous master narrative that's being created. Unfortunately, media too plays a role in promoting racism. Diagnostic card, again produced long ago. So what were the positions we took? What did we report? Here were the issues, and this is part of the official document of the testimony. Early identification of an authoritarian regime. Say no. Mainstreaming and normalization of nepotism, creating a family political brand and making it take root. Rapid concentration of power of a single family control over public office. Weakening of public institutions, the public service, politicization and militarization of this country. Resistance to power sharing. We all know there was great resistance to sharing power and addressing the political question that has festered this country. And lack of commitment to protect the dignity and rights of all people, not some people. I hope these words actually cause pain to you. And I hope these words make you reflect. I hope these words make you want to change something.
We all know that the investigation is near complete, but it is so not concluded purely because there is no political will. People talk of the need for system change. I ask the leaders first, are you prepared to change? Without that, there will be no system change. Lasantha's case is an emblematic one. Some do ask me, do you think this country would have reached this stage if Lasantha lived? I know the answer. Lasantha would never have been allowed to live. So that question cannot be answered. There was no political will to keep Lasantha alive. But as Peter reminded, as Lasantha's children reminded, the country is going through difficult times.
ලසන්තව ජනාකීර්ණ මහමග මරා දාලා අවුරුදු 15ක් ගත වෙලා යුක්තිය නැතිව අවුරුදු 15ක් කවදාද මේ රටේ මේ අනීතික හිංසනයන්ට ගොදුරු වෙච්ච පෑන පින්සල මෙහෙවච්ච මාධ්‍යවේදීන්ට යුක්තිය ඉෂ්ට කරන්නේ අද අපි දන්නවා මාධ්‍යවේදීන්ට යුක්තිය ඉෂ්ට කරනවා කියලා යහපාලනය ගෙනාපු පුද්ගලයා අද මේ රටේ පළවෙනි පුරවැසියා ඒ අතිගරු රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මැතිතුමා මං එතුමාට මේ පණිවිඩය දෙන්න කැමති කවදාද ඔබතුමාගේ මිතුරා ලසන්තට යුක්ති ඉෂ්ට කරන්නේ කරුණාකර ඔබතුමා දැන්වත් නින්දෙන් අවදි වෙලා මේ මාධ්‍යවේදීන්ට මේ ජනවාරි මාසයේ මරා දාපු අතුරුදහන් කළ මාධ්‍යවේදීන්ට යුක්ති ඉෂ්ට කරන්න ඒ ඔබේ වගකීම
සියලු දෙනාම එකතු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ලසන්තගේ අවුරුදු 15ක් අපිත් එක්ක නැති වෙලා. එතුමා රට වෙනුවෙන් සහ මාධ්‍ය වෙනුවෙන් සටන් කළා. අද වෙලා තියෙන ඉරණම අපි තාම මේක නීතියෙන් පිළිසරක් ලබාගෙන ඉන්න එකයි. අප මේ අවස්ථාව උපයෝගී කරන හැමදෙනාම එකතු වෙලා මේ සාධාරණ ඉෂ්ට කරන්න එකතු වෙන්න. කාලක් තව ගන්න අවශ්‍යතාවයක් නැහැ. සැබෑ තත්ත්වය දන්නවා නම් අපි එකතුව මේකට උත්තරයක් ලබා ගන්න.
ඔව් මට ඊයේ වගේ මතකයි ලසන්තගේ ඝාතනයට ටික දවසකට කලින් සිරසට ගෙන තිබ්බා බෝම්බ ගැහුවා අපි ගහලා අපි ගියා එතනට ගිහිල්ලා ලසන්ත කිව්වා හර්ෂා මොනවා වෙයිද දන්නේ මේ යන විදියට කියලා ඊට පස්සේ ටික දවසකට පස්සේ තමයි මේ සිද්ධිය වුණේ දැන් අවුරුදු 15ක් දැන් මේ මහා ලොකුවට කතා කරාට යුක්තිය ඉටු කරනවා කියලා යුක්තිය කිව්වට කෝ යුක්තිය ලසන්තට හරි දැන් අපිට ආරංචි වෙන විදියට කේස් එක ක්ලෝස්ඩ් ඒගොල්ලෝ කන්ෆෙෂන් ඔක්කොම දීලා ඉවරයි එහෙනම් කොහොම නීතිපතිවරයා ගේන්න එපා මේක මේ සමතයකට ඉවරයක් වෙන්න කරන්න ඕන ඉතින් මොනවද කරන්නේ රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිවරයා එදා හරි විපක්ෂයේ ඉන්නකොට ලසන්ත කොච්චර නම් දෙයක් කරාද අමතක වෙලාද රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිවරයාට ලසන්ත කරපු දේවල් අමතක වෙලාද එහෙමනම් බලය කියන්නේ Tamanට ඕන විදියට පාවිච්චි කරන්න මිනිස්සු ලබා දෙන දෙයක් නෙමෙයි ඒක ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදීව ජනතාවගේ සුභසිද්ධිය සඳහා පාවිච්චි කරන දෙන ලබාදයක් රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිතුමනි ඔබතුමාට මම අලුතෙන් කියන්න ඕනේ නැහැ නේ ඔබතුමා දන්නවනේ සියලු විස්තරේ හරි ඔබතුමාමනේ අපිට කිව්වේ වෙච්ච දේ දැන් කරන්නකෝ ජනාධිපතිතුමානේ හරි යුක්තිය ඉෂ්ට කරන්න හැමෝටම මම දැක්ක සංධියක් ඉන්නවා මෙතන හරි දැන් කොච්චර කාලයක්ද දැන් අද කතා කරනවා මේ Truth and Reconciliation Commission එකක් ගේන්න සත්‍ය දැන ගැනීම හොඳයි හරි සත්‍ය දැනගන්න ඕනේ වගවීමක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ ඊට පස්සේ රෙපරේෂන් එකක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ නැවත මේ ප්‍රශ්න මම කියන්නේ උතුරේ වෙච්ච සම්බන්ධයෙන් ජනාධිපතිතුමා උතුරේ මේ දවස්වල හිටියේ නැවත නොවෙන්න වක බලා ගන්නවා හැබැයි අතුරුදහන් වූ කාන්තාවන් අතුරුදහනුවන්ගේ පවුල් වල කට්ටිය හිරේට ගන්නවා මොකක්ද රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්තයෝ මේකේ තේරුම හරි අපි ඔක්කොම එකතු වෙලා නෙමෙයිද මේ කිව්වේ මේ කුළුණු 4ක් මත අපි මේ රටේ නැවතත් සිංහල දෙමළ මුස්ලිම් සියලු දෙනාට එකට ජීවත් වෙන්න පුළුවන් පරිසරයක් ගොඩනගනවා කියලා අපි නෙමෙයිද කිව්වේ ඔබතුමා නෙමෙයිද ජිනීවා වලට ගිහිල්ලා මේව බාරගත්තේ කරන්න ඔබතුමා නෙමෙයිද එහෙමනම් අපි හදවතින් වැඩ කරමු හරි ඉතින් මට කියන්න තියෙන්නේ මේ ලසන්දගේ ඝාතනයේ වැරදිකරුවෝ දැනම ඔවුන්ව මේ මොනවද මේ ප්‍රවේශම් කරලා හංගගෙන පැත්තකින් තියාගන්න එක ලැජ්ජ සහගතයි. හරි? යුක්තිය කියන්නේ මේ කාටත් එකසේ ඉෂ්ට වෙන්න ඕන දෙයක්. බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
මම ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ නීතිඥ අතුලේස් රණගල මම ලසන්ත මහතාගේ ඝාතනයේ සිට එදින සිට නොකොඩවාම ගල්කිස්ස මහේස්ත්‍රාත් අධිකරණයේ ඔහුගේ අයිතිවාසිකම් වෙනුවෙන් පෙනී සිටි නීතිඥයෙක් වශයෙන් මා විශාල කැපකිරීමකින් එදා රාජපක්ෂ පවුල බලයේ සිටියේදී අපි නිර්භීතව මෙවැනි පුවත්පත් සාකච්ඡාවලට සහ වොයිස් කට් වලට මුහුණ දුන්නා. ඒ නඩුවේ සැබෑ තත්ත්වය ජනතාව දැනුවත් කිරීමට මේ ජනමාධ්‍ය එදා ඉඳලා නිර්භීතව එදත් එතුමාගේ ඝාතනයේ අසාධාරණය සහ අමානුෂික ලෙස මරා දැමීම පිළිබඳව ජනතාව දැනුවත් කරා. අපි එදා ඒ කරන කර්තව්‍යයේ උඩ ඒකට කතා කරපු අය සාටකයා ඝාතකයා කියලා අපිව පාරට ඇදලා දාපු අය අපි ඒ වෙනුවෙන් පාරවල් ගානේ හඬනගා සද්දනගා කියපු අය අද බොහොම කනගාටුයි ඒ සාටකයේ පෙරෝගන ඔවුන් සමග කිරිබත් කනවා කේක් කනවා බොහොම කනගාටුයි. නමුත් අපි කවදාවත් අරින්නේ නැහැ ලසන්තගේ ඝාතනය පිළිබඳව උසාවියේ තිබෙන නඩුව නැවතගෙන ඔහුට සාධාරණයක් කිරීමට අපි නීතිඥයෝ හැටියට මා ප්‍රමුඛ කණ්ඩායම ලෑස්ති වී සිටින බවට දිවුරා ප්‍රකාශ කරනවා.
Who the perpetrators were, and even the families who are accorded benefits together with the deceased. So which gives an indication and also a reason why there is no political will to see justice is moved ahead to the Sarkar. Very difficult. Welcome all.
In the sweet by and by.
Talk with Bawanta Prasad. ඔබ සොයන චැනලය